Review copy provided by Gameland Games. Solo board gaming night here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Tiny Epic Crimes along with its expansion, the Kingpins. As always, I'm going to give you an overhead view of the table so you get an idea of just how much space the game takes up. And although this is technically a small box game, you're going to need a lot of table space to be able to fit everything that's going to be needed to play the game properly. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the box and see what's inside. The box of Tiny Epic Crimes looks really well done. All the cover art used for every single side of the box looks incredibly well done. Even the back shows you everything that's included. It really boggles my mind to see just how many components Gameland Games managed to cram inside of this very small box. Now, I'm putting a little bit of emphasis on this because later on in the video, I am going to come back to this and talk about it a little bit more because it actually turned out to be for its detriment. It's cool that they were able to fit so many components inside of the box for packaging purposes, but oh boy, this is definitely going to come back to bite you later on. Just like the box, the rulebook may be small, but it is jam-packed with information and rules that you have to learn before you start your first game. There's a lot of rules to learn in these 19 pages, but thankfully they included a really well done reference guide in the back of that rulebook to help you out. With that out of the way, let's go over just the basics on how to play the game. On your turn, you spend time to do things like move around the map, arrest mobsters, and many other actions. There's a very helpful reference card that details every action you can do. The first officer that crosses the red line on the time track draws and sets up an event card. During the mobster roll step, you roll the dice to see where you have to spawn a mobster. There's more to this step, but I'll talk about that later. When you collect evidence, you get to increase your badge rank by 1. Once you've collected enough evidence, you get a clue that brings you one step closer to figuring out the murder mystery. You have 48 hours to find out who committed the murder, but in-game events and effects can reduce the amount of time you have left. There are many more rules and details on how to play this game. I recommend you read the rulebook for the rest of the details, and don't forget the 2-player game variant when playing solo, double-handed. I'd like to take this time to share a quick story with you. Before I got into the board game hobby, I was searching for a clue to play with my family in an attempt to get my kids to stop playing Fortnite. At that time, Clue was sold out everywhere and it was nowhere to be found. We did, however, find Funkoverse on sale for $11. This was the moment I realized there was more to board games than just rolling dice and moving along a circular path. Unfortunately, I never did get to play Clue, and I never got my kids to stop playing Fortnite either. However, I did get to discover this hobby, and if it wouldn't have been for searching for Clue that day, I would have never experienced so many board games. Late last year, I heard about Tiny Epic Crimes, and I knew I had to play it. This was finally my chance to solve a murder mystery, and probably the closest I'll ever get to playing the original Clue. Let's move on to the review and see what I thought. Although this tiny box is jam-packed with components and content, good luck getting it all to fit back inside the box once you've opened it. There is just no way to do it without the box feeling like it's gonna burst open. Even if you don't sleeve the cards, it's impossible to get everything back in the box. How Gameland Games managed to get this game packaged is beyond my comprehension. That must have been challenging. Unfortunately, you're going to have to come up with your own storage solution. I ended up using a craft box from Hobby Lobby to store all of the tokens and meeples while storing the cards in the game box itself. I know having a small box is the point of the Tiny Epic series, but it defeats the purpose if you have to use a separate storage box to store the game. The theme fits the game very well. Set in the Prohibition era of the 1920s and 30s, every card, tile, and meeple evokes the look and feel of that era. Personally, it reminds me very much of the NES Dick Tracy video game. In that game, you travel the city using an overhead map, looking for clues, fighting mobsters, and gathering witness accounts in the hopes of solving the crime within a set amount of time. As a matter of fact, it's extremely similar to how Tiny Epic Crimes plays and looks. The city, the mobsters, the evidence, and the time limit all fits the theme very well. It does feel like you're in the 1920s and 30s gathering evidence, stopping crimes, and sending mobsters to jail. If you're like me and remember watching Dick Tracy and movies like The Untouchables and The Godfather, I think you'll enjoy this theme. Also, the bullet dice look great. Unfortunately, dice will determine your fate many times throughout the game. During the mobster roll step, you roll dice to determine if and where mobsters appear. The thing is, if the dice result already has a mobster in that area, you have to draw an event card, which not only causes more chaos on the map, but if you already have a maximum amount of events in play, the amount of time you have to solve the case is reduced. What's worse is that every time you roll doubles except for double threes, not only do you have to add the mobster to a location, but you have to roll again and add another mobster. This can happen many times in a row and can cause a cascade of chaos to appear on the map. This is a dramatization of how I felt every time it happened to me. When this happens, it can be infuriating. On the other hand, if you roll a double 3 or a 6, no mobsters are placed on the map. It's a double-edged sword that can place your fate in the roll of the dice. Having never played Clue, I was really excited to play a board game in which I had to solve a murder. The actual part of deducing who the killer was by gathering evidence and reducing the amount of possible suspects was fun. However, I spent much more time putting out fires that the game threw at me via events than I was actually solving a murder. Also, every time I was successful at gathering a clue, it would reduce the amount of suspects by half. I wish there would have been more options when it came to the weapons used, gang affiliation, escape vehicle, and rank of the suspects. That way, whenever clues are obtained, you wouldn't be removing half of all the possible suspects. What I'm trying to say is that I wish the game would have focused more on solving the actual murder other than focusing on reducing the chaos on the map. Personally, I was expecting the game to focus more on solving the murder. The event cards not only manage to create chaos, cause you to lose abilities, and possibly reduce the amount of time you have to solve a murder, but they also make the game feel fiddly. So many times I was on a roll and looking forward to collecting a clue, then an event card would be revealed. This would many times bring the game to a screeching halt. almost every event card has some sort of setup that has to be done every time an event is revealed. The worst offenders were the events that had multiple tokens or mobsters that you had to add to the map. You have to roll the dice for each token and mobster before placing them on the map. This is then followed by the actual mobster roll step, which can cause the unlucky rolls I spoke about earlier. Remember? This got tiresome very quickly. In many ways, the setup time of the event cards got in the way of the fun. The Kingpins expansion actually made Tiny Epic Crimes slightly more enjoyable for me. It added enough depth without overcomplicating the core rules. Using the patrol wagon to bust flop houses located around the city is really fun. Scoping out flop houses and revealing the Kingpin's identity added a lot to the core game that, in my opinion at least, elevated the experience. Now, you're still having to deal with the events, mobsters, clues, and fighting against the clock, but the added gameplay elements of the Kingpins increases the fun factor significantly. It almost feels like it was originally part of the game itself, but it was turned into an expansion instead. Either way, if you're interested in Tiny Epic Crimes, I highly recommend you pick up the expansion as well. I always wanted to play Clue and solve a murder mystery in board game form. I really thought Tiny Epic Crimes was going to fill that void for me. The lack of storage space in the box was a letdown. I understand that the point is to fit an epic game in a small box, but this is rough. Solving the mystery of fitting this game back in its box is more challenging than the game itself. The Prohibition theme era was very well done. If you're a fan of Dick Tracy, The Untouchables, and The Godfather, you're going to like the theme of this game. The city looks great as well as the art on the cards. Unlucky rolls can decimate any chance you had at solving the murder. Sometimes the dice play nice, but when they don't, be prepared to deal with the overwhelming odds the game can throw your way. Solving the murder can feel more like background noise. The focus is actually placed on putting out the fires that the game throws your way via the event cards. The event cards can feel fiddly to say the least. Having to stop everything you're doing to set up every event card that is revealed gets tiresome, especially when you're about to collect a clue. The Kingpins expansion adds a nice amount of variety and fun factor to the game. It almost feels as if it should have been included in the core game. This expansion is a must-buy for those interested in playing Tiny Epic Crimes. Being a fan of Scott Elms, especially when it comes to Warp's Edge and Reckland Run, I was really expecting to adore Tiny Epic Crimes. Unfortunately, it missed the mark, for me at least. Now, I don't think this is a bad game. It just wasn't for me. For the price, it's a very low-risk investment if you find it interesting, and it won't break the bank, so there's that. It is worth playing in my opinion. For how long, however, will depend on what you're looking for. This was Solo Board Gaming Night. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you and everyone else has a great game night. Take care, Solo Knights.